Welcome back for a second bonus episode of the KC Sports Authority podcast this week. If you caught the last episode, we hinted at what this one's going to be about. And this one is all about the upcoming NBA draft, which is just hours and hours and hours away, less than 24 hours by the time this will drop. For those of you who have been following the podcast since the beginning, you know that for Spencer and I, this is some of our most fun stuff to talk about. So we're excited to get into it. Tonight we're not going to dive into the draft as a whole because we don't want to bore all of Kansas City market with the KC specific stuff. So for those of you that really love NBA content, stick with us because we'll continue to do more. But for this, we want to do some draft preview and profiles of former Kansas Jayhawks, Gradey Dick and Jalen Wilson. We're going to talk about where they could go in the draft, what their ceiling and floor is for being drafted, what teams make the most sense for them, some NBA player comparisons for their game style, play style, and all that, and then maybe a few places we'd like to see them. And if we have time, we might jump into a couple, just big time NBA trades that could happen because there's already been the big one with Bradley Beal going to the Suns. And supposedly over the next 48 hours, there could be a ton of movement. So let's just jump right in. So we got the NBA draft coming up. The order is set. The teams are set. Obviously, Victor Wembanyama is going number one overall. That's been determined for like 10 years now, supposedly. Incredible freak of an athlete. Don't want to get into his game, but just incredible. Only thing I hope doesn't happen for him is that his first week in the league, he doesn't just get destroyed by a Joel Embiid, Giannis, and tears his knees and is done. Because that frame has me a little worried. But anyway, again, not an episode about that. But let's just get into the two KU guys. So Gradey Dick, that's where we want to start because he's the higher profile target. Gradey Dick measured in at just over 6'6" without shoes, 6'8" with shoes. It always baffles me how much shoes add to their height when they're doing these things. But with shoes, he's listed at 6'8", 205. A guard or wing forward, however you want to look at it, depending on the team. Coming into this year's draft class, Gradey is slotted as one of the top wing players in the draft, one of the best pure shooters in the draft, top 3 or 4 shooters in the draft for sure. His ceiling for picks that I've seen is anywhere as high as number 6. I've seen him drop as low as 18. I think his range is very wide because of the teams that are picking in between and the potential for a lot of draft day trades to move up and down. He's a guy that there's about 12 teams there in that 6 to 18, 6 to 20 range that would all love him, that he would fit perfectly with. It's just going to be how the draft shakes out, how many picks get moved. I don't think as a KU fan, I'm necessarily worried if he drops because there's still three or four teams that I like a lot. So let's look at him first. Before I get your guys' take on it, let's just kind of see. I pulled up some of his scouting reports on a couple different things and talked about how he grades out. So obviously his primary position is going to be that 2 guard or 3 guard, that wing position. His primary focal point is his shooting capability as a spot up shooter, knockdown shooter. That's what he's going to be asked to do in the NBA, and that's what he's going to be expected to do. But Gradey does grade out pretty well for his size as a wing perimeter shooter. 6'7", 6'8" with shoes on is pretty good size for a shooter. That puts him in that kind of Klay Thompson mold as far as height, that Kevin Huerter mold as well, which teams are going to be excited about his length. Downside's not the best off ball, or creating his own shot off the dribble kind of guy. Maybe that's something he'll develop. But overall, there's a lot of excitement there. I don't want to dive in too much of the details on it because I think all of us are familiar with how he plays. But as far as how he can transition to the NBA, I've got my list of guys that I think he compares to, and I kind of put them into tiers. And I'm going to kind of bounce this off you guys and tell me what you think. But I started with, his ceiling. What is the absolute ceiling for Gradey Dick if he were to completely hit on his talent and continue to develop, some of his offensive skill set and defensive skill set? And the first 2 on this list definitely way up there. And the primary top one that I've seen other people put out there as is the top, if he truly hits, is Reggie Miller. Now, that's a big comparison. Reggie Miller, one of the all-time greatest shooters in NBA history, top 3 shooter of all time, probably up there with Steph and Clay as the top 3 shooters of all time. And oddly enough, the next comparison is Klay Thompson. So just starting right off the bat, how quality of a comparison do you guys think that is for him? Is that too high, or do you think if he hit his potential, he could reflect, a Klay Thompson or a Reggie Miller type career?
Man, that's asking a lot. Throwing Reggie Miller out there, that's asking a lot
Yes.
from Gradey. I think Klay Thompson comparison, I think that's a little bit more realistic. I if I was pressured to name someone that I think that he could resemble in the NBA right now, I probably would lean towards saying Klay's name. But my issue with Klay is, and I kind of look down on him just a little bit because he's on the Warriors, and I hate the Warriors because I'm a LeBron guy. But with Klay, my issue with him is he never dribbles the ball. He catch and shoot or bust. That's what he is. I think Gradey has a lot more athleticism than Klay. I think Gradey is I think he's more suited to potentially kind of mold into this pseudo kind of Klay Thompson almost, maybe even a little bit of a LeBron James driving mold if he can get really creative. He has athleticism. He can catch lobs. I think Ben McLemore from Kansas would be almost a better comparison in some respects. Ben could leap out of the gym and he can catch lobs, and Grady's he's more than capable of doing that. Like you said, he's got great size. Everyone's gonna be looking at him as let's draft this guy because he's a 40% 3-point shooter and he improved defensively at Kansas over the course of the year under Bill Self, and he's going to be that classic 3 and D to start off. But I think he can really mold himself into something a lot better than that. I think he's more than that, and that's what excites me. If I was an NBA exec, I'd be really really excited. Now I'm probably a little bit biased, but yeah, I'd be really looking at him toward that six number six pick to nine
Mhm.
range, as opposed to a little bit further down the line.
Spencer, do you like that comparison, or are there other guys in your mind that you think match up to what his play style is more realistic in being?
Well, I like the Klay Thompson comparison. I think Reggie was a guy that, I mean, he could play on ball and create his own shot a little bit. And I think Klay can to some extent. I think Klay has the pump fake two dribbles in. I think
He
he
can get his
has
separation at
he can
least.
get separation and he can get a shot off. Now, my I would say the only hesitation I have with the comparison is that Klay's not a good defender. He's a great defender. He's an elite defender, elite perimeter defender. And I think a lot of the leaps that Gradey took defensively was off ball. I think he was great at playing passing lanes. I think his length plays a lot into that. But Klay is a guy that you stick him on the other players, on the other team's best player, sort of
Mhm.
thing. So I think that's where I think Gradey would need to get to in order to fulfill that sort of comparison. Shooting wise, I think Gradey not only, I mean, obviously he's a fantastic shooter. I think he's got an NBA jump shot in
Yeah.
terms of his how structural it is, the mechanics of it. He can get it off from very far distances from NBA range, and he doesn't use a ton of legs. He's not going to tire himself out. It's not like a shot that takes a long time to get off. So I like the comparisons in terms of offensively. It's just defensively, I do need to see a little bit more on that. I think, and JB already brought this up. I've always compared him to Ben McLemore because I think he played almost identical to BMAC,
Just
but
different size.
the other one I would
Yeah,
say Brandon Rush. I think I see a little bit of that too in
Yep.
the
Brandon Rush was on my list. I had him as if Grady's, no offense to Brandon Rush, love Brandon Rush, but in the NBA, he struggled some. I had Brandon Rush as
yeah,
his floor, or if he can at
yeah,
least be that, he's at least capable of being that as his floor. But I think that is a great comparison because they're very
yeah.
similar body type. But
My
Brandon
my
Rush, way better
floor,
defender.
yeah, my floor is Davis Bertans. I will throw that out there.
Ooh,
Uh,
that's even
yeah,
worse than the Duncan Robinson comparisons.
yeah. I see the Duncan Robinson comparisons, but I would argue that Grady Dick's a much better athlete. So that's where I think the big differentiating factor is with me, because it's easy to see Grady come in and just label him as every other Caucasian shooter coming off.
JJ Redick, Kyle
You know,
I mean, he gets a lot of Kyle Korver comparisons. And again,
And he plays nothing like Kyle Korver.
yeah,
That's the part that drives me nuts. But no, I think Brandon Rush, again, kind of like you said on the low end. Obviously, I think that's a decent player comparison. But I think the Clay and Reggie ones as a ceiling are fair.
Kevin Herter comparison is the one, and Duncan Robinson, honestly, are the two that I think seem the most realistic, at least in the short term. Most
Yeah.
teams that are going to draft Gradey, they're asking him to come in. They're not asking him to come in and be a dominant scorer right away. They're asking him to come in and play a shooter's role, like Kevin Herter did with the Hawks and now with the Kings, and like Duncan Robinson does with the Heat. And Duncan, I think, showed, it's been a couple of years now, and even though he didn't get much playing time until the playoffs, he's capable of going off ball and cutting to the lane, using the pump fake and driving. I think, JB, you said it, Grady's very good athletically speaking. And I think that part of his game is slept on a lot because everyone's just expecting him to be this top shooter. If he can develop his ability to create his own shot, come off the dribble, come off pick and rolls, cut, slash to the lane, use that pump fake, I think his ceiling goes up. And in that comparison, a guy that I've seen float around, and this is only if Gradey develops more into a scorer and less of a shooter, but it's Gordon Hayward. The measurables line up. I think Hayward's a little bit better defensively because he played the four in college more. But I like that comparison a lot. Gordon Hayward is capable of running the offense himself, and Gradey is capable of doing that if he needs to. But he's got the athletic ability to drive and dunk it. So I think there's a lot of opportunity out there for Gradey. He's probably going to be a guy that, let's say 5 years from now, as we're looking at KU players in the NBA, him and if CB keeps doing what he's doing are probably two of the top four guys as far as impact in the league. You hope Ochai is that other one because, again, they're all that wing who can guard and can shoot and hit the open and jumper. So I think Grady's fit is great. So when you look at where he's going to get drafted, I've got my thoughts on where I'd like to see him go. There's a ton of teams. I really don't have too many that I'd be worried about. But Orlando, Indiana, Washington, Dallas, Utah, Oklahoma City are the main teams in Atlanta, are the big teams looking at him. Utah's got 2 picks to go get him. Oklahoma City's sitting up there. Those are the ones that seem the most likely of landing places. Oklahoma City needs a good spacing wing that's still got good size, and Oklahoma City loves the size. So having a guy that's 6'8" next to a 6'6" Gilgeous-Alexander and a 6'8" Josh Giddey who can still get his shot off is cool. Pairing him in Utah with Ochai would be interesting, having them both back together. Indiana, like I said, really loves him. Dallas is the expected pick from everything I see, but all talk that I've seen is that Dallas is probably trading their pick and packaging it with something else. So he could still go to Dallas, but honestly, Gradey wouldn't. There's not many teams out there that I don't think Gradey would fit in well with. But let me get each of you the team you would realistic team that has a realistic shot at drafting your team you'd like to see him play for, and the team that you're looking at in that 6 to 20 range. You're going, please, for the love of God, do not take Gradey Dick.
Yeah, I'm looking at the draft order, and I think it's a little scary because one of the comparisons or one of the projections is Orlando Magic. They've got a pick at number 6, they got a pick at number 11. Orlando absolutely could use him. I think a lot of different teams could use him. If Orlando took him at 6, I'm a little fearful for kind of the same reasons I was talking about earlier. I'm a little fearful if they pass on him at 6, I don't think he'll be on the board by 11. I think he could be taken by then. I think there's a big chance. Now, where do I not want him to go? It would probably be I don't like the Jazz. I don't like the Jazz, honestly. My fear is that in the short term, he's going to fill a very similar role to what Ochai is already trying to do. I don't want Ochai and Gradey to be battling for minutes. I'm a KU fan. I want to see these guys on different teams. As much as I'd love to see all the Jayhawks come to the Jazz, I do not want to see them together on the Jazz. So I'm really hoping that's not the case. I think the Pacers could end up taking them. But where do I think is the best spot? I know the Wizards just got a lot of trade value in that Bradley Beal deal, but could they take him at number 8? Because you're losing a lot with Bradley Beal off your roster, and you got to fill that role. Now, I'm not saying Gradey would instantly fill that role. I'm just projecting out here. I think there's potential to bring him in and kind of allow a new look and feel to that Wizards team. So I'm looking at that as my sleeper that no one else is really mentioning. Number 8 to the Wizards. I would hate to see him go to the Jazz. And as far as Orlando, while he might have a great fit, I just don't want to see it, mainly because I don't think Orlando's going anywhere anytime soon in terms
I
of
think with
success.
Orlando, and I think they're a team that people are sleeping on. I'm gonna place down.
I'm sleeping.
I'm
placing
sleeping.
a bet
My
that
alarm's not set.
I don't know, man. I think they can make the
I'm
playoffs
sleeping.
next year.
I'm hitting that snooze button nonstop,
After
man.
their rough start, they played 500 ball the last like 50 games of the year, and
Yep.
he would be a good fit. I think with Orlando, it's the fact that they've been bad for several years that you just think bad situation. Like we all sit here and go, please, Kings, do not draft a KU player. But the Kings are also in a completely different spot now than they were, the last 10
Right.
years they've been drafting KU guys. But yeah, my two favorite spots, and these are because these are two teams I watch a lot. I love the fit in Dallas alongside Luka and potentially Kyrie. Big question mark there is you've got 3 guys that are not known to be strong defenders. I think if they kept a guy like Reggie Bullock on that team, I think Gradey could learn a ton about how to be a true 3-and-D guy from a veteran. But I think he'd be great coming off of hitting corner threes off of a Luka pick and roll. But Oklahoma City's the one that I like the most. I think the fit is fantastic. It's putting him out there, spreading him as a shooter. Oklahoma City's got a lot of youth and talent. They really don't have anybody that's solidified that true shooter spot on the team. I like the fit there. Indiana's a pretty good one. I do like what you're saying about Utah. As much as it'd be cool to see those two play together, if he's going to Utah, him and Oach are competing for the same minutes. So I don't really like that. If he slips down, I've seen him slide all the way down to Utah at 16. I think there's a possibility that if he did slide or Golden State made a move to jump up, I think he could slide into the Warriors as a bench score. But Spencer, what fit do you like?
Well, the thing I like about Grady is that I think he plugs right into a lot of rosters, just given his size and shooting ability. In terms of where I don't, I was going to make a Sacramento joke, but I forgot they're actually good now. But even I still don't trust them. I don't want them to have any more KU players. They could win. They could go on a Warriors dynasty run. I don't want a KU guy on Sacramento.
Don't want to risk it.
But in terms of realistically, I'm with you on Utah. Plus, their rebuilding strategy is just a little iffy to me. I'm not sure on where that's going to be. I'm not sure if Dallas would be a good fit, obviously defensively wise. I think they're going to try to go for an established perimeter defender or somebody on the interior, or like you said, they're probably going to trade it away and package it. So I'm not seeing that. The two that I would love to see him on, I'd love to see him on OKC because I think they have the most solid rebuilding strategy, and I think they're going to be 5 years down the road. They're going to be no doubt at least in contention. I think they're already going to be sniffing the playoffs next year. So that would be one. I think he'd plug in pretty well with that roster. I'd love to see him on Indiana for a couple reasons. One, I think playing with Halliburton would be a good. I think his ability to create offense, he's going to be having a lot of open looks. Two, he'd get to learn from a guy like Buddy Hield, who I think would be a super good guy to be able to take some pointers for. I mean, he's not necessarily, I would say, a huge 3-and-D guy, but playing off ball, how to effectively do that in the league, I think would be good.
I'm surprised I didn't think about him as a comparison. That's a good comparison.
I think
they're
a
different build.
Different. Yeah, a little bit different build, but yeah, I could see it. And then obviously you got Miles Turner kind of drawing in defenses, which could create a lot of open looks for him. If he slides down, I could see a couple potential landing spots. I mean, I think Golden State definitely is an interesting one. Something that and this was a comparison that I forgot about. If he slides all the way to the early 20s, he reminds me a lot of Cam Johnson on Brooklyn. So I think that could be a nice pairing, having them pick up another shooter. So those are just a couple spots. There's not really too many places. I would rather him not go to Orlando, because I think I'm not going to say that they're going to be a lottery team for the next 5 years, but I think that their number one, their draft strategy sucks. They've drafted the same player in the last 5 years. It's been Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs. They're just drafting undersized.
Markel Fultz is still
Yeah,
there.
Markel Fultz. So I don't really like managing there. I don't think they do a great job putting together a roster. So that would probably be that in Utah would probably be my no-goes. Toronto at 13 would be interesting. That's the last one I'll say.
I thought that would be a decent one, because he could come in and basically be like Gary Trent Jr., and then they have one more year of Gary Trent and then move on to save cap space. But a couple sleeper teams.
Hold on. Hey, Spencer, in what world would it be possible for him to land on the Lakers with LeBron?
I was just about to mention that.
Dang it.
17.
I don't think it's likely. But here's what I'll say. If Gradey Dick slides past the number 12 spot at Oklahoma City, I think there's a couple teams that are down there between 15 and 22 that are more, they need that instant role player. I could see the Lakers being one of them. I don't know how they would move up, 5 spots to make it worth, Oklahoma City's time. I don't know. But the Lakers, Miami, Golden State, and then I'm going to throw Portland out there, and Memphis. Portland's got the 23rd pick. So depending on what they do at pick 3 or who they package and trade to bring Dame someone in, I could see them maybe taking them. I could see the Warriors taking them there. Memphis maybe, if they want another big.
I don't want them in Memphis. Let me add that to the places I don't want to see them at. I don't want them in Memphis. That was a train wreck, and then they got Ja's thing. I just no.
But pretty much anywhere Gradey goes, he's going to be in a good spot, I think, to showcase his skill set. I think his is pretty easy. Now let's talk about the difficult one, Jalen Wilson.
Oh, no.
The crazy thing about going from college to the NBA, Jalen Wilson, Player of the Year finalist. Gradey Dick is not. Gradey Dick projected lottery pick. Jalen Wilson nowhere close. Obviously, we can sit here for hours and talk about the difference of college basketball to the NBA and play style and all that. But Jalen, his draft profile is a little bit more difficult to kind of play out. Throughout the year, we saw him as high as late first round, and we've seen him as low as undrafted. He's a guy that's probably going to get drafted in the second round and is more than likely going to get a 2-way contract or be playing in the G League this year, fighting over the summer for that final roster spot. Jalen measured in shorter than I thought, 6'5" 3/4 at the combine without shoes. So even shorter than Gradey Dick, 6'7" to 6'7.5" with shoes, depending on who was measuring. All season, he was listed at 6'8" at KU, so a 3-inch difference. Yep. Some of that, I think, is the poofy hair. Jalen's a difficult one to get into because of his play style. He doesn't quite fit a specific mold position in the NBA. He's probably going to be playing the 3 mostly, because he's probably undersized to play the 4, not a great enough defender to play the 4. Kind of has that point forward type role. Not an efficient scorer, not a great 3-point shooter, not a great free throw shooter. So he's kind of in limbo right now. He's going to be a guy who's really going to have to fight and work really hard to improve his skill sets to find a defined role for him. Now, I do think he could carve out a nice role player type career, and we can talk about some of those comparisons here in a minute. But I think his projection is very tough. There are tons of teams that I think could take a flyer on him. There's not a specific team that I'm like, oh, if he goes there, he's really going to have the best career possible. But his is tough. So comparisons that I started with. Well, actually, let me get into some of his draft stuff, some of his summaries and recaps. So his pros, he's got a good shooting touch, high release, can go get his shot, can create off the dribble, really good rebounder for his size, offensively and defensively, good size for a wing, knows how to get to the line. He's got an NBA-ready body. It's just a matter of figuring out, is he going to be guarding the 3 or guarding the 4? And the fact that he can, be a ball handler is great. The cons, needs to speed up his shot process, improve his ball handling a little bit. And JB, I thought you'd appreciate this because you talked about this. I don't know if we talked about this in an episode or if it was just off air, but you said he needs to figure out how to go left. His biggest con
Yeah.
is needs improvement going left. He's slower with the ball than he is driving right. And he's not a great finisher at the rim, can force a lot of bad shots in traffic instead of passing the ball and finding the open man. Now, I think some of those cons he'll figure out how to work through because he's not going to a team where he's asked to be the guy. I think some of that will get improved on. But I think his pros are definitely what's going to help him. So as I'm looking at player profiles, and I told Spencer this earlier that there was a projection I'm going to throw out that you guys are going to probably laugh at. And I saw this, I can't remember where I saw it. And this is if he hits his absolute peak as a potential player. But coming out of college, his play style was similar, not as effective defensively, but similar to Jimmy Butler.
Jimmy Butler. Oh man, I knew
Oh,
it. Yeah. Oh man, I was thinking about it. No,
Honestly, I think Gordon Hayward is a good fit pick too. But yeah, Jimmy Butler, I read that and I was like, you know what? Jimmy Butler's not the most efficient shooter, but he knows how to get to the paint. He's scrappy. He goes after board. Now, Jimmy's a way better defender, but he has that high motor that Jimmy has. I was like, that could be interesting. That'd be, of course, absolute peak performance would be Jimmy Butler.
I could see it. I could see it. It's not that crazy. I thought you were going to say Michael Jordan or something. No, it's not that crazy. I think they're offensively, their play styles are very similar. I would say, and I think Jimmy
slow the game down, grind it out, ISO, pick and roll,
get into that 5-10 foot area, try to get some push shots, jump hooks over some guys mid range. Yeah, I don't hate the comparison.
Can I throw out a
go for
comparison
it.
and just let me see what you guys think
this was hard. I've got about 6 guys on my list, and a lot of them it's like, well, he plays kind of like that, but not like this. But he's on a bit of that guy's game. So if you have a comparison, for sure, go out there because this is a tough one.
Let me see what you guys think. This is gonna either be like an aha moment, or you're gonna say, "JB, you suck. Get off the podcast now." Is his game a little bit kind of like DeMar DeRozan? Because think about it.
Yeah.
DeMar doesn't shoot from the outside hardly ever. I mean, at one point I remember on 2K I almost never had to guard him whenever I played 2K. I never had to guard him from 3 because I just knew he would miss. Jalen Wilson, something that some people might forget from his time at Kansas, I think he actually had a lot of mid-range game to him. I think sometimes when he couldn't get all the way to the bucket, he would do some kind of spin move, some kind of fade, and just shoot a mid-range. Now, the mid-range king is DeMar DeRozan or Jimmy Butler right now. Or okay. Well, I think DeMar is a absolute ceiling for me, mainly because of the mid-range potential. You know, if he's smart and just if he's thinking to himself, I don't have to be the man, like you said, Keegan, he can find his role outside of just shooting the outside. Now, I will say that outside shot it's lacking in percentage wise. One thing that's hard to look up on stats, just by doing a quick ESPN search, is what is his percentage of shots taken from outside the arc when he's wide open. And I think he really, really excels when he's wide open. So if defensively, if people are slacking on Jalen Wilson and the ball comes his way, when he's wide open and he has all the time in the world to line one up, he's well over 40% from 3. I mean, he's a capable shooter. It's in his arsenal. So I think there's potential there. He is a tough player to project in this draft because there are some deficiencies, and but I think when he plays to his strengths, like you said, he could absolutely be a key role player and could carve out a great career in the right system.
I think the DeMar comparison is pretty fair. I mean, again, DeMar's got a heck of a career, so if Jalen Wilson can do that, fantastic. But the play style, at least, I think is an effective comparison because it's similar to Jimmy Butler's play style. But Spencer, are there any guys out there you're thinking of?
Oh man, well, I see the points and the similarities between the two, and obviously, like you said, Jimmy's a much better defender. I think DeMar's a much more refined scorer, and obviously he's 10 years in the league, so that makes sense. But he also plays a lot in the mid-range area, which I didn't see Jalen do a lot of face-ups, a lot of 18 feet out, back down turnarounds and stuff like that. I think he's a little bit closer play style to the rim. And again, you guys have said it both times. There's a lot of guys you can pull from. I think Keldon Johnson on the Spurs is a decent comparison.
That was the guy I was going to go to next.
I think he's he's an in-betweener a little bit between a 3 and a 4. He doesn't have the size to play a 4. Shooting's not where it needs to be to play a 2, a bigger 2. So I think he's going to be somewhere in that sweet spot between 3 and 4. And I think he plays a little bit like Keldon does on offensively.
They both like to back down and kind of play in the middle of the paint and use their spin moves and all that.
Right. Now Draymond's the other guy I know it's a little bit of a stretch, but I think because of his ball handling ability and because he maybe can potentially add on some size down the road, I think that could potentially be someone he can kind of mimic after. Again, Draymond, much better defender, much more versatile defender, but maybe he can grow into that a little bit. And there's a couple other guys. I try to find offensive play styles that make sense. Like Paulo Banchero kind of plays similarly offensively, but their frames are so different.
Yeah.
Trey Lance was another guy back when he was at Kentucky. I kind of saw a little bit
Kevin
about
Knox?
Him. No, Trey Lance a couple years ago.
Trey Lance.
You remember Trey Lance? He was on the
I'm thinking Trey Lyles.
Trey Lyles and Trey Lance. Not
okay.
the 49ers.
Not the 49ers quarterback.
Yeah. That's where I was getting mixed up. Yeah, back in the platoon squads in Kentucky back in 13.
Okay,
Might be a little bit of him,
Lyles.
a bit of an undersized 4. He could step outside a little bit, play in between the gaps on offense. So I don't know. A lot of guys I could potentially pull from. But I think if Jalen adds some consistency to his shot, he's got the kind of shot where he can add range to it. So if he can at least get into the mid-30s and up his defense, I mean, he has the frame of a good 3-and-D guy. I think the biggest thing that's going to hurt him is the athleticism. We joke about him not dunking, but not having explosive bounce and explosive athleticism really hurts you in the
Which is weird because he's a good offensive rebounder, defensive rebounder. It's just not part of his play style to do that. It's just odd.
Yeah. So I don't know.
That's a couple other names I saw. I tried to find names that KU fans would also kind of recognize. I didn't come up with many. KU fans that watched the Big 12. Kenrich Williams that played at TCU. He's kind of got some similarities there. Good size frame for a wing player. Isn't the greatest defender down low, but can shoot when needed, but can also, move the ball around and is good ball handling skills, can run the offense. Kevin Knox from Kentucky, kind of the same thing. And unfortunately, Kevin Knox is in that same boat Jalen's going to be in of where do I fit in on an NBA roster? I've got skill sets and I'm capable. And Kevin Knox is a bigger frame, but there's not one thing you do well enough to garnish playing time. I like what you said with Draymond Green. Again, there's aspects offensively of Draymond. Another one I put on there was there's parts of Grant Williams' game from the Celtics. Kind of being a spot up shooter, but randomly I'll decide to go get my own shot when I'm feeling like it. The most likely comparison I saw, and again, I don't think KU fans are familiar with him, is Anthony Lamb from the Warriors. G League guy last year who ended up making the team afterwards and played to the playoffs. Kind of that point forward, they used him in the Draymond type role, so you can kind of see where that comparison comes from. But I think Jalen's a guy that, again, he's going to have to find what is it that he can excel at that a team needs, because there's nothing about his game that screams, I have to have him on my roster and he has to get playing time. He's going to have to be a guy that figures out how to develop a niche offensively, whether that's coming in as a bench scorer, kind of doing the approach of like a Jordan Clarkson. Jordan Clarkson has developed himself into a great bench scorer that comes in, changes the pace of the game. Obviously a very different player. But Jalen's going to have to do something like that he can be known for, whether it's, creating more offensive looks for wing players, get an offensive board, kicking it out for a jump shot, or coming in and facilitating the offense, when during the middle stretch of the season when you're trying to get guys playing time. I think he is a guy that you could see as a, first team all G League type player. I think he's a guy that in the G League, he will probably excel tremendously because he'll be looked at more as an offensive focal point. But in the NBA side, I think he's going to struggle for a while to find his spot. So I don't know if there's really any specific teams you guys want to throw out there. I've seen the Pacers, the Hornets, and the Lakers are all three teams that he's worked out for, and they all love him and like his fit. I think he could do well with the Lakers. You're not asking him to come in and do anything. Learning from a guy like LeBron, who's kind of that point forward type, obviously very, very different game. LeBron has all the explosiveness still at, almost 40 that Jalen doesn't have. But play style, the way he initiates offense, you could learn a lot from LeBron initiating the offense, posting up when you need to, attacking the rim when you need to. I think he'd be a good fit there. The Hornets, I mean, they're I don't know what you even want to say about their franchise. They've been in limbo for years. Michael Jordan just sold the team, made a killer profit off of it, but isn't
how much did he pay at the beginning? It was like 200 something million,
297 million or something like that, and he's walking out with $3 billion from it. So that's what owning a sports franchise is.
Wow.
Whether you have success or not. But I think Indiana's the team that I think makes a lot of sense too. Again, they're a team that they have a core put together. They just need a few guys to kind of find their role. Spencer, you mentioned the Cam Johnson with Gradey Dick. I think Cam Johnson's also one that's kind of similar fit for Jalen as well. Just need to find your role. But is there a team you guys would like to see him on?
Well, now
Spencer, I'll let you take it,
man. I'd love to see a vertical contest between LeBron at 38 and Jalen at 22. Now all of a sudden, I want to see who can jump higher because it's just curious. No, I think he'd fit well in the Lakers. I'd love to see him at the Pacers if they pick up Gradey too, because that would be, I think, a solid pick up there. So, yeah, it's kind of tough because he's another guy that, like you said, probably gonna be a two-way player. It's going to be hard to judge where he's a good fit until he finds what role he's going to play.
I think culture-wise, he screams Miami Heat. And again, I'm biased because I like the Heat, but I think he would fit their culture very well.
Is it bad that I think that he kind of would fit well in Memphis? I mean, I don't know. They have a pick at 45. I could see it, but I think that franchise has a lot of drama. I'm just trying to stay away from.
Yeah.
So I'm not excited about that. I'd be more excited about maybe like the Spurs. If he could land there, I think that'd be a great place for him to learn even more under Pop, assuming that's going to be the coach for some time to come. But we'll see.
Well, he's got a $14 million contract sitting out there for him whenever he decides to come back. That's a lot of money for a coach, $14 million a year.
Yeah.
Well, here before we wrap up, no major predictions as far as the draft because I don't think that many of us really care about who all's getting. Like, I don't know, this draft doesn't scream excitement for me from a draft prospect point of view outside of Wembanyama. But I guess a couple of things here real quick. Who is the biggest star that gets traded on draft night? And what do the Blazers do with the number 3 pick?
Oh man. Well, I was going to say Beal at first, and then that already happened. I'm going to go out on a limb and say either Zion is going to get traded.
Zion's for sure. It's happening.
I think it
feels like it's happening.
Or maybe Zach LaVine from the Bulls. I think he's going to get moved.
I think Chris Paul gets moved again. I think that could easily happen.
The Clippers are already engaged in trade talks for that.
Right.
If I was a team, I would let the Wizards buy him out first and then pick him up for the minimum. I would not trade for that contract. You would have to give me a first-round pick to take that contract.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't know about any big moves. I would be interested to see what happens with Zion, but it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
I think Zion will be the biggest name traded. I think there's a lot of potential for DeAndre Ayton to get moved, even though the Suns have a stacked team. They have no cap space to do anything else with. So I don't think they need DeAndre Ayton with that team now. I think they could find someone to replace him at a fraction of the price. So I could see him getting moved. If I'm the Blazers, though, I'm a little worried because the fact that they're talking about Kristaps Porzingis and the number 3 pick as a swap, that doesn't excite me if I'm a Blazers fan. I think the Zach LaVine fit would be good, but I don't know if that's enough to put you over the top. You have to re-sign Jeremy Grant, and then you have to hope Yusuf Nurkic has an improved season. It doesn't sound like the Raptors want to give up OG Anunoby, which would fit there. So if you're the Blazers, I don't know. I mean, I know Dame wants to win in Portland, but there's not a lot of, there's talk of them trying to steal Bam away from the Heat, but the Heat aren't giving up Bam for the number 3 pick.
No.
So, the
I've
Blazers,
seen some people say they just keep the pick.
I would do that.
Yeah.
Just keep the pick. See who you get. I mean, there's enough talent, I think, at the top of this draft board that whoever lands in, Portland with Dame can be number 2 guy, if not the rookie season, the next season after. I mean, there's potential there. I don't know what's really going on in Portland. One other name I guess I just thought of, I don't think it's been moved around yet or talked about too much yet, but are Celtics moving on from Jaylen Brown?
No, they can't. There was something that came out yesterday that said they're pretty dead, that Brad Stevens is pretty dead set on not moving him and working to re-sign him to a max.
Well, good luck. I mean, everyone's been saying ever since the beginning, you got to break him up. Him and Tatum got to split. They're both great players, but can they play together?
Yeah.
They haven't produced a whole lot yet. One trip to the finals, though.
I think if anything, if the Blazers can talk the Raptors into Siakam, I would like that move. Again, I don't know if the Blazers can do enough to really put them over the top as a true contender. I think the Suns bolstered there, even though Bradley Beal is hurt all the time and makes too much money. Offensively, they're one of the most talented teams offensively. But you still have, the Bucks and the Sixers are still going to be really good. The Nuggets are still going to be the best team in the West. So any team that's trying to make a move, it's got to be enough to overtop the Nuggets. But here, I'll throw this in there real quick because I meant to mention this earlier. A sneaky comparison for Gradey Dick, Michael Porter Jr. They both have a high shot release, quick shot, super athletic. Now, Michael Porter Jr. is more athletic. I think Gradey has a similar – I think Gradey could be used the way Michael Porter Jr. is used. That was just something I thought of earlier. Not the best fit, but –
Well, Gradey passes. I think that's the biggest deal. Grady's not going to shoot over 8 people.
No.
Maybe. I don't know.
All right, well, let's wrap up there. NBA draft coming up very quickly. Super pumped to see where both Gradey Dick and Jalen Wilson land. I'm sure, maybe we'll talk some more after the draft and see if there's any other KU guys that get moved in off-season trades. But guys, thanks again for joining us. Again, this week you get 2 episodes this week. So if you haven't checked out the one that released before this, go back and listen to it for KU fans, where we talked about the return of Zach Clements and what that means for the future of KU, how it impacts this year and the years to come. But yeah, guys, again, you can hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at KCSA Pod. You can follow the podcast. If you want to watch the podcast over on YouTube, you can subscribe to us there. You can also listen to us on Spotify. Wherever you do take our podcast from, please subscribe to us. Again, we have a lot of big things planned for the summer. A lot of exciting news that'll be dropping here in the next couple of weeks about the direction of the podcast moving forward. So again, guys, thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to seeing you guys soon.